Jewish prayer is a very ancient practice, and the further we go back, Rav Cardozo, the more we see that there is actually less Siddur. There's less Jewish words written down, and if you go back to the Torah, Avraham doesn't have a Siddur, and he goes to the fields and prays what Rabbi Nachman calls Hidbodedut, personal prayer in your own words. But as history progresses, and the Rambam describes this, people forget how to pray, and the rabbis eventually, Ezra's the beginning, creates these set prayers and these set times to pray, what we would eventually call the Siddur. So I want to ask you, what is your opinion on this tension in Judaism between, on the one hand, having spontaneous prayer, which is in your own words, and whenever you want to talk to Hashem, you use your own words. It could be for a minute, it could be 10 minutes, it could be in your own room, it could be in the synagogue, but it's spontaneous, it's authentic, to use a word you like a lot, on the one hand. And then on the other hand, this very strong emphasis on routine and words being set, and there being insights that come from using someone else's words. Rav Herschel writes a lot about the ability to empathize with these words, and that they bring out insights into you. So I want to ask you a little bit about, what do you think is, number one, a preferred way to pray, personal prayer versus structured prayer, and then number two, is there a way to create a combination between these two prayers?
Yeah, also a difficult question, because I think it is a very personal question. There are people who do better, I think, with spontaneous prayer, and there are also people who do better when they have a Siddur in front of them and they pray from a book. That depends a lot on the human soul and the human capacity to be able to come up with your own personal prayer, which is far from easy. As you just mentioned before, it's very clear that for a long, long period in Jewish history, not only did nobody pray from a prayer book, the Talmud even says it was forbidden to do so. Somebody who would write a prayer book, one had to destroy it, one had to burn it. Why? Because the rabbis at that time, or perhaps before the days of the rabbis, saw a tremendous challenge in this. How can one say words which were written by also people, or they come from your own heart, or how meaningful are they? The trouble indeed starts around Ezra's time, is that the people do not know anymore how to produce their own words. And what the rabbis, I think, did was, they said like this: what we see is that people pray less and less because they don't know what to say. How are you going to speak to God? First of all, speaking to God is an unbelievable chutzpah. Who are you to go and tell God how great he is? I think Goethe, one of the great German philosophers and writers, says you have to be on the level of another person before you can criticize him or before you can praise him. And this is a problem which all religious people have. I find that myself personally very, very difficult. Who am I, Rabbi Cardozo, to tell God, Hakil, Hakadola, Gibor, Nora? There's absolutely no comparison there. So there's a chutzpah involved. The reason why we actually do that, and I have written about that, is that we are doing something very strange here. When God would come and say to us, let's say that I'm praying and suddenly I hear a voice from heaven saying to me, who are you, Rabbi Cardozo, to tell me that I'm a great God, right? So how would I defend myself? I would defend myself by saying something like this: I didn't start this, This was started by Adam and Eve. It was started by Avraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They did that, and they somehow gave that as a tradition to us. And why they dared to do that, I don't know. But they felt a need for that, and it seems that God also wanted them to do that. But at the beginning, there was absolutely no prayer book, and a prayer book was basically something forbidden. But then, when people stop knowing how to speak to God, or even more important, when people start to ask for the wrong things, it becomes an egocentric prayer in the sense of I need it and I need that and therefore I'm asking this God, then you are missing the point of what prayer is all about. At that moment the rabbis step in, the sages step in and say, we better give you a dictionary, I call it deliberately a dictionary, with words which you can use so that you are praying and still be close to what you should be saying if you would know how to say them or you would discover these words on your own. You can't discover them anymore? We'll give them to you. Here they are. But now we have a big problem. And I think that problem is coming up in our own days. And that is, now we have a prayer book and we have worked through it. And we say 3 times a day, we say prayers, which are repetitions of yesterday and the day before. And that repetition becomes a huge problem because we automatically are now going through these prayers because we know them by heart, more or less. Then the question again is, this is a kind of compromise to human weakness. This is not a real tefillah. Real tefillah is no doubt a spontaneous prayer, if you know how to do that, which is an enormous art. And you need to have the neshama, you need to have the soul, and you have to be educated that way, which perhaps was also one of the great things about the Hasidic movement, that the Baal Shem Tov tried very hard to bring this back. But how many of us are able to do that? So when I am praying, or when we are praying in synagogue, let's say, then what we are doing is we are giving into our weaknesses. We are saying, okay, this is all what we can do. We all say the same prayers. Most of us don't even remember anymore or do not realize anymore what they are saying. But it is better than not saying anything at all. But that obviously, you pay a heavy price for that. And one has to find a way in between, I would say, a compromise, using some of the words which the sages wrote down, and then afterwards use your own prayers and combine these two, which is something which I personally do. But it also means that I am leaving the world of the Shulchan Aruch at that moment, because I'm making my own prayers, which I'm not saying is forbidden, but at least it is not a priori the best way how the Shulchan Aruch, the Codex of Jewish Law, sees it. And this is a problem, and I believe that we will see in the future that more and more people are going to be more spontaneous about their prayers, because this repetition ultimately creates lots of problems. I add to that something which you may have wanted to ask me in another question, but I do this now already, and that is this. Praying is extremely difficult when you have to do it 3 times a day. And then repeat the words once and every time again. If you look in the Shulchan Aruch and in the early sources, you see that the sages said there are moments not to pray. For example, when you come back from traveling. You come back from traveling, your mind is not set on prayers. They say at that time, don't pray. You know why? You can't concentrate. We later on, and you find that also in the commentators on the Shulchan Aruch, changed our minds about that and said we still pray even when we are not able to concentrate. And while I fully understand that and appreciate that, you pay a heavy price, because now you are praying not because it is a prayer, but because it is tradition. And that is not what it is. I'm prepared to speak this open and openly say this. I do not always pray all the 3 prayers a day, exactly for that reason. Not because I'm less religious or anything like that. As I said before, I'm not sure whether I am religious, but even when I would claim that I am religious, I cannot pray 3 times a day the same prayer. So sometimes I skip Mincha or I skip Ma'ariv. I always say Shema, no doubt, because I think that's Midoraita, that's a biblical commandment. But when I do say Mincha, I put my full body and soul into this, and it is a real Mincha, and that's the reason why I do not in the weekdays go to synagogue. Why? Because they're running through the prayers most of the time. It goes much too fast for me. I can't keep up with it in any way. And I don't have the chance to do it the way as I would like to do it. But I pay a price for that, and that is that I'm not always part of the community. So what I do is on Shabbat, I always go through all the prayers. I want to also listen to Kriyat Torah, the Parashat Shavua. But very often I pray beforehand the prayers, before I go to the synagogue, because I know that in the synagogue I'm not going to be successful. This is a problem, and this is a struggle, and not an easy one to get out of. But I think that we will find in the future that more and more prayers are going to be spontaneous. Last word about that, since we stand in front of Yom Kippur, I have a big problem with Yom Kippur prayers because we keep on repeating the same things over again. The 13 midot of God, all sort of also things we repeat it once more, and then also time, and then also time, and we ask for forgiveness. I think there's a time now to come that we have to change some of these prayers, explain them in the synagogue instead of just saying them, and making people to sing them perhaps, and to give it much more attention than just running through all of them and making sure we're just in time for the shofar blasting at the end of the Ne'ilah prayer. There is a problem there, and we haven't yet solved that.